Okay, so again, my name is Sarah Lundquist, and I'm here with Families for a Livable Climate. I'm the Communications and Outreach Coordinator. And I'm just going to do this quick intro, and then I'll turn it right over to Youpa, and we'll start with the program. So I was starting out with a land acknowledgement. So this screen up here, this is a map of the state of Montana. It's showing the traditional homelands of the indigenous people. That's these what do you call them, like the pastel-y colors. And then the red is where their current reservations are now. And so for our land acknowledgement, we wanted to show visually the lands that were stolen from indigenous peoples during colonization. We recognize that indigenous peoples have been on the front lines of the climate crisis and will be disproportionately affected by climate impacts. However, they are also at the forefront in leadership and have been speaking up about protecting Earth for generations, courageously leading water protection efforts across the world and other climate actions. We deeply respect and look to their leadership as much as possible. Okay, I'm just gonna share a couple of quick things about Families for a Livable Climate. So we are a fairly new organization here in Missoula, and we do work also in other parts of Montana as well. Our mission is to create community for climate action and empower families to advocate for a livable future. So our goal is to engage more Montana families in the climate movement. We have several programs that help us do that work. One of them is workshops and events like this, where we teach people about the climate crisis and also about ways to engage in climate action. And then a big piece of our work also is about climate storytelling. So we have a number of programs specifically about storytelling and talking about climate change, conversations across differences about climate change, that kind of thing. And we also support and organize parents and caregivers in different climate actions. And then the last piece I wanted to share about is as the largest energy provider here in Montana, we have a lot of engaging with Northwestern Energy also and asking them to switch to clean and renewable energy. So that's one of the things that I brought here in case any of our people who are here in person would like to sign. We have a letter that we're sending to Northwestern Energy from parents and caregivers and community members that's just asking them to transition to clean and renewable energy. For anyone who doesn't know, they recently put out a net zero carbon emissions plan, which we were happy to hear, but when we read it, we were a little disappointed by the actual contents of the plan itself. So we wrote a letter just asking them our, our three asks are for them to actually transition to clean electricity, to invest in renewable. The plan actually, unfortunately, does not talk about investing in wind or solar power at all. So we want to ask them, or we're asking them to do that. And then the third piece is we're asking them to support low-income and tribal energy assistance programs as well. So I have a letter here that I can pass around if you guys are interested in signing, and anyone who's online, you can see the letter and sign it online as well, and that's just on our website, which is livableclimate.org. But I will pass this. And then I have a quick recording notice. This presentation is being recorded by Missoula Community Access Television as part of a media assistance grant donated to my organization by MCAT. This event is being streamed locally live on MCAT channel 189 and will be downloaded to MCAT's video on demand at a later date. So thank you so much to MCAT for being here. And yeah, without further ado, I am going to pass it over to Youpa, and here I'm going to give this mic to. Can you hear me okay?
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you for joining us tonight. As Sarah said, my name is Youpa, and I'm a volunteer with the national organization Beyond Plastics in support of their work to end plastic pollution. before we get started tonight, so we'll try one more time with technical things, but before we get started tonight, I wanted to let you know that I use the words we and our sometimes in this talk, and generally it's in reference to humans as a species. And I wanted to thank Families for a Livable Climate for all of the work that you do and for hosting this event tonight. Welcome. And I wanted to thank the Missoula Public Library for sharing this community space. So I learn new information about plastic pollution nearly every day. If you have information that's different from what I share, please let me know. I'd like to hear about it. So, yay, it works. So I want to start with the foundation for why we must end plastic pollution and its contribution to climate change. This is a quote from David Boyd's book, The Rights of Nature. Humans are but one species among millions, as biologically dependent as any other on the ecosystems that produce water, air, food, and a stable climate. Plastic contaminates our water, air, and food, and decreases climate stability. At the core of plastic pollution and climate disruption is a mistaken belief that Earth's resources are infinite, and that we have a right to use them for our benefit, even when the resulting harmful consequences are often directly borne by vulnerable lives and ecosystems whose stories and voices are not always heard. Plastic pollution from every stage of plastic is toxic to life. We have responsibilities in our kinship with the web of life that makes our lives possible. Our health depends on a healthy, regenerative, just, diverse, and vibrant Earth. Oops. As an artist, I collaborate with the natural world in my photography work, and I spend hours photographing water. And I think about plastic polluting water all over the planet. A 2019 Environment Montana study of 50 water samples taken around Montana found that 66% of the water samples contained one or more types of microplastics. When I was making this mask out of alder bark and plastic from a blue water bottle, I was thinking about how plastic is now part of Earth's biological systems. When I made this press out of plastic that had collection of plastic that had no place to go, except a landfill or incinerator, I made an absurd dress reflecting upon our absurd relationship, current relationship with plastic. When I was making it, I was thinking about the wonder of plastic, the bright colors, and the seduction of the convenience of plastic. The gloss of plastic is interwoven into every aspect of our daily lives. But the harm caused by plastic is not always visible, unless you live, for instance, in a fence line community next to a facility creating plastic pollution. I've been wrestling with my own relationship with plastic, like many of you probably do too, for, let's see, about 2/3 of my life. On one side here, you see the 2 plastic bottles that I've used to refill my shampoo and hair conditioner for 40 years. I added it up, I was like, oh. And they will continue to serve my needs and last way longer than my life, potentially hundreds of years. On the other side is the weird little messy pile of plastic stickers that I've been peeling off my fruits and veggies to help remind me of all the plastic that is designed to be waste. A couple of years ago, I reached a tipping point that led me to seek ways to do my part to change the larger systems that allow and create plastic pollution. A catalyst for action for me was seeing this photograph of an albatross mother feeding plastic to her chick. It's estimated that 5 tons of plastic are fed to albatross chicks each year at Midway Atoll. Over 90% of the 320,000 chicks that hatch each year on the atoll contain plastic in their stomachs. And it's estimated over half of them will die because of it. So not only does the plastic occupy volume in the chicks' stomachs, leading to a greater chance of death by dehydration or malnutrition, but sharp plastics can fatally puncture portions of the digestive tract. The plastics may also contain harmful toxins, which can accumulate in the tissues of the chicks, compromising their survival. So as a human and as a mother, when I see this photograph, I become aware of how wrong our current production and waste systems are. It's estimated that by 2050, 99% of all seabird species will be ingesting plastic. So when I see what we're doing to the albatross chicks in so many species, the albatross chicks are just one example. I have to ask myself, what are we doing? It's likely that many of you are asking that same question. So I want to pause for a moment and talk about hope. We need hope to be able to do the work that needs to be done. This is a quote by writer Ray Bradbury. Action is hope. There is no hope without action. This may seem like a strange image to pair with hope and action. This photograph was of the Cuyahoga River in Cleveland in 1969, shortly before it caught on fire due to extreme pollution. The river was once one of the dirtiest in the United States. It was mostly dead. Now it has 70 species of fish. When this photograph was taken, there was no EPA, no Clean Air Act, no Clean Water Act. There were no federal legal or regulatory mechanisms to protect our environment. In spring 1970, inspired by student anti-war activism, Senator Nelson helped create Earth Day as a way to force important health and environment issues onto the national agenda. 20 million Americans demonstrated in different US cities. And in December 1970, Congress authorized the US Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA. We have the capacity to mobilize to correct mistakes. And now we have a growing awareness about how our health and environment laws and regulations are sometimes unjust or inadequate. As a citizen, your voice matters. Your voice matters and your actions matter. This slide acknowledges the work being done by young people all around the world. In the center, one example that some of you know about is the first youth-led climate trial in the US, Held versus the state of Montana, set to begin February 6, 2023. So Ricky Held, up here from Broadus, Montana, one of the 16 Montana plaintiffs, said, "The suit is to help us protect our constitutional rights, protect the homes we love, and the people we care about." So each of us has something to contribute to ending plastic pollution, whether it's smaller or larger actions. I will share some more actions or some actions at the end of our talk. But first, I want to make sure we cover some important information about plastic, because knowledge provides the power for propelling action. So sometimes learning more about plastic pollution sure you can relate to this. I can relate to the character in this cartoon. She said, my desire to be well informed is at odds with my desire to remain sane. So thank you for being here, companions. So I invite you to take a deep breath with me if you're so inclined. Breathing is always good. So if you want, close your eyes, and on your own, if you feel like it, take a nice deep breath. Okay, here we go. Everywhere we have looked on the planet, we find plastic, from the tops of high, remote mountains to the deepest part of the ocean, the Mariana Trench, where 72% of the amphipods they studied contain plastic fibers and fragments in their guts. Each of us is breathing in and ingesting a credit card's worth of plastic a week, adding up to 40 pounds in a lifetime. We found plastic in beer, salt, earthworms, apples, and in human blood and placentas, and recently deep in the lungs of living humans. So why is that a problem? And what can we do about it? Every year, we produce over 300 million tons of plastic. One example of this volume, you can see this is our own valley here. 5 trillion plastic bags are consumed in the world every year. In the US, we use 100 billion plastic bags per year, which takes about 12 million gallons of oil to produce. And plastic waste is growing at an accelerated pace. This study that came out recently that plastic waste is projected to almost triple by 2060. So we're just expanding. Plastic pollutes at every stage, from fossil fuel extraction to what happens to it after it is used. And in the process, disproportionately harms people of color and people in economically depressed areas around the world. It is important to remember the harm caused by plastic at every stage, because often proposed solutions only address plastic waste. The first part of this image is from the important film, The Story of Plastic. How many have seen it? I recommend it if you haven't. I added the orange box to list the different kinds of disposal, or what happens to plastic after it is used. There is no away with plastic. Plastic, whether it starts out tiny, such as microfibers released from clothing, or whether it starts out larger, such as a plastic water bottle, degrades into smaller and smaller pieces or components, but never biodegrades and becomes a beneficial or regenerative part of life cycles. Plastic also contributes to climate change at every stage. The report Plastic and Climate projects the annual emissions from the stages of the plastic life cycle, reaching the equivalent of 615 coal plants by 2050. The plastics industry's greenhouse gas emissions are on track to surpass those of coal-fired power in the US by 2030. If the plastics industry was a country, it would rank as the 5th largest climate polluter. So most of us have some awareness about the impacts of human-caused climate disruption. In Montana, the majority of climate models project increased temperatures, wildfires, and drought, which we know can lead to decreased health and quality of life. So I took this photograph, you barely see it, but there are mountains back there, on my way to my mailbox during last year's wildfire season. The excessive heat warning, I don't know if you can see it, but it shows that some eastern parts of the state reached 109 degrees on July 27th, last summer. And the Montana Drought Monitor, even though around this area, we've had a pretty good moisture this spring, but from May 31st of this year, the orange and red, it shows a good chunk of the state is designated from severe to extreme drought. So if I was to take a survey and make a list of what each of us values about living in Montana, we would probably have some things in common. It might include being able to see and enjoy the beauty of Montana. It might include valuing a healthy quality of life for our fellow citizens, our families and loved ones now and in the future. Part of protecting what we value is addressing how plastic contributes to climate change. Beyond Plastics has published I forgot to say this. I volunteer with Beyond Plastics, a national organization that works to end climate pollution. And they have this report on their website that's available, The New Coal, Plastics and Climate Change. So we go over kind of some things about plastic. About 99% of plastics are made by combining chemicals and fossil fuels. On a side note, most human-made chemicals are derived from fossil fuel byproducts manufactured by the petrochemical industry. It's all very connected. Most of the plastic currently manufactured in the United States comes from ethane, a cheap byproduct of hydraulic fracturing. Hydraulic fracturing or fracking is a method, a process of pumping millions of gallons of water mixed with chemicals and sand deep underground to fracture the bedrock so the pockets of gas can be extracted. Ethane is a component of the natural gas that is extracted from fracking. Plastic is one of the few viable uses for ethane. The ethane from a fracking well is piped to an ethane cracker plant at a facility like this one being built in Monica, Pennsylvania by Royal Dutch Shell. The ethane is heated at high temperatures, requiring massive amounts of energy. And the process is called cracking because heat energy is used to break apart or crack molecules to form new molecules called ethylene, which is a main ingredient or feedstock for single-use plastic packaging. In 2020, facilities with ethane gas crackers emitted greenhouse gas releases the equivalent of 35 average size coal-fired power plants 1 year. So the ethane formed in the cracking process is still gas, and it needs pressure and a catalyst to turn it into polyethylene, the most common form of plastic. So a chemical reaction causes small molecules called monomers to bind together to form a chain-like molecule called a polymer. So ethylene polymerized to form polyethylene. So the resins created in this complex process are then melted, cooled down, and made into pre-production pellets known as nurdles. Great name. So it's estimated that 250,000 tons of nurdles leak into waterways each year. Nurdles join other tiny pieces of ever-degrading plastic in our air, water, and soil, as where they can cause harm as obstructions and as they leach and attract and absorb toxic chemicals, as they circulate and bioaccumulate in biological systems. Are you seeing that in the plant? Yeah, we found microplastics in lettuces, in apples, in, it's moving throughout everything. So a wide variety of chemicals are used in plastic production, and to give plastics its desirable characteristics. So softer, harder, resistant to flame. And many of the largest and most hazardous chemical families, such as heavy metals, flame retardants, phthalates, bisphenols, and fluorinated compounds, are used in the production of plastics. So one thing I forgot to mention is researchers at ETH Zurich identified 10,500 chemicals in the plastics they studied. So chemicals that are used to make a plastic may be released throughout each stage of that plastic, posing risks to human health, the environment, and recycling systems. So there's not enough transparency, research, or regulation of the chemicals associated with plastics. And that we could probably spend a year on, and I'm still learning. But what I learned is frightening. So the plastics industry utilizes the inexpensive ethane from the fracking boom to provide a new revenue source for oil and gas. So as the overproduction of plastics is being driven by manufacturers, not market demand. As the economy moves away from reliance on fossil fuels for energy production and transportation, the industry is producing and marketing single-use plastics at an accelerated pace. The plastics industry is the fossil fuel industry's plan B. Much of this growth is happening in Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia, Louisiana, and Texas. The industry has invested over $200 billion, and 333 new or expanded petrochemical facilities have been proposed or permitted since 2010. Shirley Levine, founder of Rise St. James, a faith-based grassroots organization. You heard of her, Nancy? She's the one with the signs in this photograph. She's one of the protesters of the proposed Taiwanese plastic giant Formosa's $9.4 billion petrochemical complex named Sunshine Project. So the project, slated to be built in the Louisiana community St. James Parish, sits on an 85-mile corridor of the Mississippi River known as Cancer Alley because of the health consequences of the 150 petrochemical facilities and oil refineries in the area. So around St. James Parish, there are already 12 petrochemical facilities. And need some water for this. These facilities emit greenhouse gases, the equivalent of 3.5 coal-fired power plants each year, this proposed project would, and emit 800 tons of toxic air pollutants annually, doubling air emissions in St. James Parish. Rise St. James, Louisiana Bucket Brigade, and Health Eagle, represented by the Center for Biological Diversity, sued to invalidate the Clean Water Act permits issued for the project in 2019. In August 2021, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers ordered it will require a full environmental review of the proposed project. So it's not over. There's a lot of money involved in this. It's not over, but here's an example of hope in action. So, because of our time, I'm going to move from the production and the plastic pollution to the after-use stage of plastic pollution. Since 1950, we've produced over 9 billion tons of plastic, over half of which has been produced since 2004. So that gives you an indication of how fast it's growing. 6.3 billion tons has become plastic waste. 40% of current production is for single-use purposes, designed to use briefly, one time, and then discarded. Plastic waste is a global issue. In addition to the problems that the United States creates at home with plastic, the US, like many wealthier countries, is exporting plastic waste, often under the guise of recycling, to countries unable to safely manage it. In an interview, Lily Binti Kamal, a Malaysian woman who lives next door to a plastic recycling facility, she said that when she grew up there, her house was surrounded by forests. And now the water and air is too polluted for her children to fish or to even go outside. In places like Surabaya, Indonesia, to get rid of the onslaught of plastic is openly burned or uses fuel in local neighborhood tofu factories. In one East Java village, a consequence of burning plastic is that toxic dioxins in chicken eggs were 70 times the level allowed by European standards. Gaia, awesome group, the Global Alliance for Incinerator Alternatives, summarizes in the summary about plastic pollution, said, it's a common myth that the plastic pollution crisis is solely a waste management problem. Any responses that prioritize end-of-pipe technology over addressing the root cause, too much plastic production, will not only be futile, but will also increase toxic and climate pollutants to the environment. So many plastic waste solutions may look like they seem like a good idea on the surface, but they don't look at the big picture of the whole plastic pollution cycle. So one question we can ask about proposed solutions is, does it look through a big enough lens? So why can't we recycle our way out of this mess? It's a big effort and there's not much reward. For years, invested corporations have been marketing and telling the story that we can solve the plastic pollution problem through recycling, and it puts the burden on communities and individuals. They don't have to take, they can dodge responsibility if they do that. But so a recent report by Beyond Plastics and the last beach cleanup documented a 5 to 6% recycling rate for post-consumer plastic in the United States in 2021. So factoring in additional losses that aren't measured, such as plastics collected under the pretense of recycling that are burned, the true recycling rate could be even lower. And only a portion of recycled plastic is effectively recycled, which means, and Sarah knows all about this, that it was turned into a similar product or upcycled into a higher quality and longer lasting product. The rest is downcycled. And that can happen maybe 1 or 2 times at the most because of the way the material degrades. So eventually downcycled products are put into landfill or incinerated because they will have no recycling value. So even if we get better at mechanical recycling, which we need to do, it doesn't address the pollution of the creation of single-use plastics or the overproduction of plastics. And there's also the concern of plastics, chemicals, and recycling. A recent report found higher levels of chemicals like BPA, a known carcinogen, a known harmful to health, higher levels of chemicals like BPA in recycled PET compared to virgin PET. And some of these chemicals were a swirl in it. We don't have control over how things are getting all mixed together. So here are a few things to keep in mind. Many types of plastic aren't designed to be recycled. like a chip bag. Many plastics are not designed to be recycled. It's a challenge to collect uncontaminated plastic, and the few plastics that can be recycled are mostly downcycled. Recycled plastic has little value, and in some cases, no market value because it's cheaper to buy virgin plastic for production. So the overproduction of plastic puts a financial burden on municipalities, forcing them, cities and towns, to manage increasing quantities of plastic, most of which are not recycled. So a 2020 Greenpeace study found the following: only some number 1 PET and number 2 HDPE plastic bottles and jugs can be legitimately labeled as recyclable in the US today. Plastics number 3 through number 7 have little value and negligible to negative value, and are essentially a category of products that municipal recycling facilities may collect but do not actually recycle. So plastic number 3 through number 7 waste is being sent to landfills or incinerated. A recent update, I talked to someone out at our local recycling facility, and he said there is a market for number 5 PP polypropylene, but they don't have the resources or the sorting equipment or the ability to collect it here. So that makes me think that it can't have a whole lot of value. But if anyone knows more about that, I'd like to know. It's been hard for me to understand what happens to plastic when it gets recycled. So we can reduce our consumption of plastic by bringing our own bags, refilling when we can, and we can try to avoid buying single-use plastics, but avoiding plastic is hard, right? Because we don't currently have many choices. We can recycle the number 1 and number 2 plastics that we can, and we can pressure businesses to provide better options. But this problem is too big to be solved at the individual level. We need better regulations to reduce the overproduction of unnecessary single-use plastics. So another false solution for plastic waste is incineration. 12% of plastic has been incinerated. Incineration emits 68% more greenhouse gases per unit of energy than coal. Despite being a major contributor to climate change, the industry stays afloat by relying on renewable energy credits, costly subsidies, and externalized costs, siphoning public tax dollars away from real renewables and other more cost-effective solutions. Some of the chemicals, I see your face, Nancy, it's like, ah, we need to have a some of the toxins that are emitted from incineration include cancer-causing, endocrine and immune disrupting dioxins, furans, and heavy metals, including mercury, cadmium, and lead. Modern air pollution control devices can capture and concentrate some of the pollutants in the incinerators. However, they can neither prevent captured pollutants from being released into the environment in the form of ash, slag, or sludge, nor can they capture hazardous ultrafine particles. Of the 72 incinerators operating today in the US, 80% are sited in environmental justice communities. The Covanta incinerator in Chester, Pennsylvania is the largest of its kind in the US. It burns about 200 tons of recycling material every day. Zuline Mayfield, a lifelong Chester resident, said that they truck the trash in. So there are about 400 to 500 trucks going in and out of that facility a day. So imagine living with that. She said the impact, the incinerator has had in our neighborhood is that 38% of the children have asthma now. They have a high infant mortality rate. They have high incidences of cancer. And you cannot open your windows because the smells just permeate throughout the household. Other false solutions include so-called advanced recycling technologies. That Reuters 2021 report acknowledged are being marketed and touted as environmental saviors that can allow for the plastics industry's continued growth amid mounting global pressure to curb the use of plastics. So these methods are primarily techniques for using high inputs of energy, not good for the climate, to turn plastics into fuels, not good for the climate, or attempting to chemically reduce it to its original monomer form to be repolymerized. So a 2020 Gaia report based on publicly available information found that of the 37 plastic advanced recycling facilities proposed since the early 2000s, only 3 are currently operational and none are successfully recovering plastic to produce new plastic. So, should have breathing times throughout this whole talk. So it's going to take all of us from a local level to a global level. It's going to take solutions, will take governments to regulate, businesses to innovate, and individuals to act. It's important to support actions that stop the toxic overproduction of unnecessary single-use plastics, stop the greenwashing and false solutions, support a regenerative circular economy, and actions to stop the harm and injustice and pollution at every stage of plastic pollution. And we need better transparency and regulations of toxic chemicals associated with plastics. And we need to pressure big brands to switch their business models to refill and reuse. So the plastics industry and big businesses like top polluters such as Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, Unilever, Nestle, and Procter & Gamble. These are Break Free from Plastic, does brand audits around the world every year, and they are on the top of the list. They're harming the planet, and whatever regulations, intentions, or unmet goals are in place, they're not working. And the problem is too big to be solved at the individual level. So for these reasons, we need better global, national, and local regulations and accountability. And I can come back to this if you want, but just for time, so we have some time to talk, and I've been talking a long time. I'm not going to go over global actions right now, but there's some interesting things happening globally. So we can come back to this if you want. There is on a national level a bill that addresses many of the plastic pollution issues that needs your support, the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act. One of the many organizations working on this bill is Break Free from Plastic. I like their summary. They say, this act will reduce plastic production before it has the chance to pollute. Makes sense, right? Increase actual recycling rates and protect frontline and fence line communities. So this bill was introduced 2 years ago and still hasn't had a hearing. So it's got a lot of pressure from industry on the other side. They're introducing, many bills that are in opposition to this bill. Beyond Plastics urges you to support this bill, and they offer resources and guidance to call or email your congressional members. So I urge you to do that. It doesn't take very long. So you can follow Beyond Plastics on social media. And on the website, you can make donations, check for updates, and participate in calls for actions. So there are many resources on the website, and you can look for actions that fit your time frame from a few minutes to a longer amount of time. So I really encourage you. And if you sign up on the list here, I can send you some links for more resources as well. So Beyond Plastics is building a grassroots movement. I've taken classes, I participate in a monthly national groups, and there's just so much that people are sharing from around the country. So if you want to become involved, there's many ways to do that. And they have training and resources available. So I've been in touch with some people in Bozeman that are in the process of forming maybe one, maybe two Beyond Plastics groups. And if there's enough interest here in this area, that's a possibility to form a local or affiliate Beyond Plastics group here as well. So regardless of how that all pans out, Beyond Plastics has resources to share for local actions. Okay, so now we get to local actions. In Montana, any regulations, I have to say this carefully because it's kind of confusing language. There's a ban on any local regulations that ban auxiliary containers, which includes plastics. So in the last legislative session, there's a ban for any, so no local organizations can innovate and try and figure this out. Any local actions have to be done on a state level at this point. So I am working and hoping to gather and work with others who want to bring legislation into the next upcoming 2023 legislative session. So it starts in January, so it's not that far away. And what that means in terms of strategically, what's the best legislation to bring forward at this time? It's going to be a very challenging legislative session. So there'll be some thought and lots of brains and work to figure out that. But I think building the coalition of groups and individuals who are committed and who want to reduce plastic pollution, we have to start, and we have to find, what even building that coalition will bring us along. So, if we find people in every part of the state that say, yeah, I want to do something about this, then we have that strength to bring to the legislators. So I love that our Constitution has really a mandate: shall maintain and improve a clean and healthful environment in Montana for present and future generations. That's part of our Constitution. And I love that. So we also have to vote people in so that this Constitution doesn't get overturned. So that's a really important next step as well, is finding out who your representatives are and what. It really shouldn't be a partisan issue. Our health is our health, everybody's health. So that's my hope, is that we can find that common ground. So action is hope. If we work together, we can strengthen our actions and amplify our voices. Thank you for being here tonight, whether it's in Zoom or at a later date or in this room. I appreciate you being here. That was a lot of information. So I'm happy to take questions and hear your thoughts. Thank you.
We have this room until 7, and by no means do we have to stay until 7, but yeah, at this point we can open it up if anybody has any questions or comments. I'll monitor too on the Zoom if anybody.
I'll let
calling
you
in
turn it
wants
off. I
to
didn't turn it
ask me
off yet.
questions or anything. You can put it in the chat or you can unmute yourself. Does anybody have any
I'll
questions?
roll closer to you. Oh, I have a sign-up sheet here and some cards. I hand wrote the best email for me, so if you want that, and if you're interested in being part of the evolution of this next step, please put your contact information down. And we stopped taping, so don't worry.
Oh, phew. Thank you. Well, that was absolutely incredible. And you didn't use notes. I thought, is she reading off the back wall? How does she have all this in her head that she can say it in sentences that make sense? And it is packed. So thank you.
You're welcome. I practice on my walks with my dog and such.
This is a lot of work, a lot of work.
Well, it's a complex topic, and I feel like, I could do a shorter version, but it feels like we need to know some of this information. We need to know some of the details and how it's so connected.
Mhm. Well, good. I'm so
You can do anything you want,
I
Nancy.
didn't say anything wrong. But I really thank Erica. Just wish we got it. I don't have access to it.
Well, it'll be available on link that I can share with, that we can share with people.
Yeah, and I also have the
Okay.
Zoom, this Zoom is recorded too, so we'll put it on our website and I'll send out an email. Did you guys RSVP? If you didn't, that's okay. You can sign up, just put your email on that list and make sure that you get emails.
Julian.
Julian. nice to
Julian's
meet
our
you,
new
Julian.
intern.
Yes.
Oh, excellent.
Yes.
And what is your name?
Nancy,
You've
another
got
Nancy.
two Nancy's.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know April Charlotte?
I do know April.
I
Did you
saw
see
her.
up there?
Yeah, she was my old host mom. I lived with her for a little
Oh,
while.
okay, yeah. April and Chief, I asked them if they could be part of this, and she said, sure.
Great picture, yes. I was trying to take a picture. I'm like, oh my God, it's April and Chief.
Do something.
I can go back to it if you want.
Oh, it's I see enough of that. That's fine.
Wait, let me put this action in hope because that's kind of the tagline of Families for a Livable Climate.
Oh,
Actions are hope.
Great. Well, that's what you do a good job with that. Well, I think it's easy to feel overwhelmed. If we don't have actions, it is overwhelming.
Yes.
Right. I mean, the knowledge is somewhat overwhelming, even though we know plastic is bad. To find out how bad is kind of horrifying, but yet important for us to know. But, my first question was just, when I recycle my PET plastic and my number twos, where do they go? Are these things shipped?
So the number one and number two, I don't have this 100%, but I do believe there's enough pressure for companies to be able to say they're using some recyclable content. So that I think the clear number ones and the milk jug number twos are probably being recycled. Whether that's one time and then it's downcycled is probably more true than not. But it is.
Spokane.
Is that where they
They go
go?
to
I've not
Spokane,
known.
I think. But I went out to the dump or not to the dump, to the company, in town and asked.
I think a lot of it gets sent, what I was told, to Seattle.
Yeah,
And they sort
yeah,
the higher value plastics.
yeah.
And then the rest, and unfortunately, there's really no transparency, and it really is, what can we do with this stuff? So it's incinerated or shipped away. And to me, it's like people paying to collect the number 1 through number 7 recycling, thinking that it's a good thing. To me, is just, like,
I've been meaning to write public services all winter. I haven't done it, to ask them to please reissue guidelines for the recycling in Missoula because I'm confused and I've written out a page of questions, like as I'm washing out my hands, I'm thinking, well, am I supposed to remove the label? It's, you know, what about the tops to your milk jugs? Do you put them on? Do you, you know, do you throw them out? What do you do?
I
There's
put
a
them in a
whole,
box on my back porch.
and then what?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
But someday it might be an art project. There's another artist we talked to, you know, that during the
that's right.
legislative session that we can make some things that we can march around.
Yes.
At the Capitol.
I love that idea.
Yeah, let's make art with
So
this stuff.
just to bring, it is a visibility issue, you know, and some people think that's weird. It does draw attention.
It does, it's colorful.
Yeah, it's very colorful, yeah.
I think, oh, sorry.
But
I think what's really hard too about that question, because so I used to work in a solid waste district, and so we would get questions like that all the time from people of how to recycle properly.
Yeah,
And what's so challenging for the folks at that, the folks in the solid waste or, you know, Republic Services or whatever, not to say they're, never mind, I'm not gonna say anything about Republic Services, but to give them a little bit of credit is that all these manufacturers on the production end are creating all of these things that are not, like Youpa said, they're not designed to be recycled. And so they're having then to deal with it at the end of life. And that's, so sometimes it's like just new packaging comes out and new materials that the waste sector can't even keep up with it. So that's, you know, that's part of the reason or part of the problem is that
yeah, like
that nobody knows what to do with it.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
it's,
some of,
yeah.
you know, I think it's Dave out at Republic, you know, it's like plastic bag, get rid of them, you know? Or we had a discussion and I was kind of pushing him on it, because I brought a jug that I'd had for a while that's number 2 but colored,
Yeah.
Oh,
Mhm.
and he said no. And I said, we need better regulations, and he said, no, we need consumers to drive it. And I said,
Okay.
okay, well,
Hmm.
what if we regulated so that we don't have these stupid colored number 2s, and it was something that you could actually recycle? And he said, that'd be good. And I was like, that's a kind of regulation, right?
They have a board that shows supposedly what's not recyclable and what is in plastics out there. And they have a number, so I don't know, they have a red thing up there. And outside, they have clearly marked bins for the recyclable stuff. And it's wonderful, just the 1s and the 2s. And I went out and I didn't even know it was just 1s and 2s.
oh,
I thought it was others, and I wanted to find out what others. What else is all this stuff, the styrene, the
Yeah,
this, the that.
no others.
Just that, so I learned that, but I was confused by the red jug that was up on the board there to tell the public that that's also okay. And the guy that I wanted to talk to was not there that day, the big guy. So I talked to a lovely employee who was confusing, but nice. And I thought, it's gotta be a bunch of us writing. Okay, you just need to be really clear. And with plastics, especially plastics.
and
So-
part
Because
of
people
it-
want to do the right thing.
Yes, they
Yeah,
do.
I think a lot too. It takes time and real attention, I find, because, you know, I have to get my reading glasses on and look for
Yes.
that little triangle and make sure that it's a 1 and not a 7 or something. So, you know, I think if it could somehow be more evident, I think maybe more people would do it, but it is work to do it, and I'm willing to do it, but I don't know how many, if it's not easy to do, how many people are going to.
Right, and that always goes back to my, like, we just need to have more foresight in when we're designing the products in the first place.
Yeah.
They need to be designed, well, first off, to be reusable, but then
Yes.
to also to be recyclable.
And the reusable part is tricky unless it's really designed for it because of the chemicals and the, you know, it's like a lot of plastics you really shouldn't be reusing, you know?
Yeah.
Because,
Uh-huh.
but designing for a cleaner, simpler, these kinds of plastics are very usable and recyclable. And even if they're, downcycled, we're still saving some things on this end in terms of production and the pollution on this end. But yeah, refill.
And I know that they're not biodegradable, but I still like Trex planks that are made out of milk jugs.
And plastic bags.
Probably my jacket is made out of
Oh, yeah,
milk
never.
plugs, or,
Yeah.
because it's
Fleeces.
our fleeces. And I just learned this year that they give out this,
Yeah.
I didn't know that, they give out these fibers.
Yeah, like, so
And those
60
fibers get in the water, and then they go downstream, then they get in the fish, and then,
Yeah,
So
so
you-
this whole idea of, yes, we're recycling, and
Yeah.
60% of our clothing has plastic in it.
yes.
And,
Ooh.
like the amount that gets released in the wash, but also I think like 3 times as much just walking around
I think
with it.
so, just on our skin
Yeah.
and in the air.
Yeah, so
Oh.
just that awareness of
Oh,
how we're,
How we're spreading it.
oh, it's,
oh, boy.
these researchers, I think it's
Yeah.
mostly in Denmark, and they're all looking at the chemical implications for plastic.
Mhm.
And they said we're experimenting on this global level with no controls in terms of
Yes.
chemicals in plastics.
Yes, yes. And of those, what, 1,500 chemicals you
Well,
said?
and 10,500, and that's not even all of them. That
Yeah,
was just the
right.
ones that they studied.
Exactly, but
Right.
then how many have been tested for public release?
Well, they don't have to.
They
They don't have
don't,
to.
No.
none of them, or,
No.
one out of
They're innocent until proven
proven
guilty.
guilty,
Yeah.
right? It's just awful. And I lived in Louisiana before I moved here 24 years ago. And I would drive between New Orleans and Baton Rouge, where I lived, right along Cancer Alley, and just breathe it. And it was visible, smellable, and terrible in terms of the communities that lived near all those things. And then I heard about the Formosa thing, I think in that movie that you mentioned, The Story of Plastic, they talked about that. The Formosa Plastics wanting to build this huge thing in Cancer Alley. And I was thinking, oh gosh. So, and all I do, little things. I take every single plastic bag and I use it at least twice, at least, and it's stupid, but it means I buy less plastic.
Mhm.
That's just me as a consumer. But, and I of course use the cloth bags, but a lot of the bags that organizations send you are made of plastic.
I know.
It's crazy.
I know.
No, it's not cloth. I have
know.
half of mine now that I'm thinking about it are plastic. So
Well,
anyway,
and it helps me when I feel the burden of those kinds of thoughts in my own head, is that, it takes fewer resources to use what we already have than to get new bags or new.
yes,
So I think sometimes, each of us has to juggle what we feel comfortable. Some things I just have had to get out of my life because I can't look at them without feeling sick.
yeah,
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I try to remember that. And there's a zero waste chef, Anne Marie Binot, I think her name
Oh,
is.
yeah.
She said, we don't need a few people doing zero waste perfectly. We need 1 million people doing it
Oh,
imperfectly.
harsh.
And I'm like, I'm an imperfect human.
Yeah.
I support that notion.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, when it's like when we think of the deeper and complex harms caused by this, it looks pretty innocent. It looks all clean and shiny.
Well, I don't know if Mylar balloons are plastic. Is that a plastic Mylar?
Yeah. So beyond plastics, they have a sample bill that like bans. Sorry. My
Somebody's
watch
being
is
called.
ringing.
Oh,
My
it's
son got
hers.
this watch.
Oh,
Anyway, that ban like 4 or 5 different things like straws, coffee cup stirrers and lids and balloons and plastic bag, like
Yeah, yeah,
whole
a
slew of them.
simple menu.
But
I talked to someone at MEIC, the Montana Environmental Information Center, and said plastic's a big one. Like it would be really hard to pass anything to do with plastic in the next legislative session. And she went so far in this state, in many states. She went so far as to say to plan on it to fail and have a study resolution ready to go, because then it will get 2 hearings, you'll get more information out to the public. And so I'm still kind of, and you know, as people gather in this process and we kind of brainstorm, you know, so I don't think that 5-item thing is it's too much. It's like, so taking, even though it's necessary and there's extreme things happening, we need to figure out how to have some movement. And one of the things I've thought about, and I'm open to any ideas, I haven't been doing this very long, and there are a lot of people that have been doing this longer who know things more than I do. But Marilyn Marler, who's House District 90, I think, or somewhere here in Missoula, she's introduced for a couple legislative sessions a ban on polystyrene, also called styrofoam. And it's failed. But my thought is, well, maybe we take that one on because it's so clearly nasty in terms of its impact on the environment, and it doesn't. There are other ways, other materials available to substitute. It's not like it's impossible to find another option for the burger, you know. So I don't know yet, and I look forward to hearing from people about, okay, we want to do something. What's a good thing to do? And just starting to, part of it's educating so more people understand. You know, well, I mean, even on simple levels, like, do we really want to fill up this beautiful state with landfills? Yes, they have the technology to keep things, you know, pretty contained. But is that what we want to do? You know, and it's expensive, and it causes all this harm, you know, before it ever gets to the landfill. So, you know, sometimes it's hard to look at, well, all of these things are happening somewhere else. My little bottle is just going to the landfill, or, you know, it's like, we want to make it okay. So that's, but I'm open to hearing, like, what should be. I think plastic bags might be hard, really hard, but I don't know.
California has banned single-use plastic bags, I believe, and maybe the state of Washington, I'm not sure. But I have, in the last couple of years, as I've been on my plastics thing, I go up to any company that uses plastic straws, that gives them out, and I tell them about how they're killing the turtles and the, you know, fish and the whatever. And I say the alternative, although I know it's trees, is just go back to the paper straws. Do you think you could tell your boss? Or I ask for the boss. And a lot of them are receptive. Well, I never thought of that, but I suppose, you know, so I mean, that's one little thing I've been doing. And then I've written to Costco's chief, because Costco says, oh, we are so environmentally friendly and everything. But they sell everything wrapped in, every bottle is in these thick plastic collars, you know, you can't even get the stupid things out. You buy 4 jars of mayonnaise, they're all linked together with this plastic stuff. And, you know, I really think taking on some company like Costco that's local, is a good thing too, and just getting a relationship, writing.
Yeah, I think relationship is really important. The group in Bozeman, the Plastic Pollution Reduction Coalition.
Is that what they're called?
They have quite a few members who are business owners, and they're sick of it too. And I think in terms of legislation, we really need businesses on board to say, so I testified in the Senate committee on House Bill 407 in 2021, and the big push was it's too hard on small businesses if we regulate in a piecemeal way. So that's the umbrella that the bill was put forward. My suspicions are that nationally there was some, you know, big industry money behind this. There were no bans in the state on plastic. So this is, you know, and the beverage industries were all there, and, you know, it was, but there was not, they really didn't understand the harm caused by plastic. Very few people on that committee understood that, you know, one person said, well, can't we, you know, can't people just recycle better? You know, that was kind of where it was at. But, and I wish I could have been in the room with people. It was all on Zoom. I was like, this time I want to be in the room. I want to look people in the eyes.
Well, that's interesting that you bring up businesses, because that's another lens. I think a lot of time people will think, I don't know, zero waste is a hard one, because a lot of times it's framed in the individual, like what can you do to reduce your own waste? But there's so many things that you can do, you know, policy wise, or just working with businesses. And that's, I don't know where this is at, but Home Resource, I used to work at Home Resource, and they do a lot of zero waste things. And as part of the zero waste plan that we have here in Missoula, they were working with businesses to get them like zero waste certified. So they would go to a business and do a waste audit and suggest things that they can do to reduce plastic use and reduce their waste. And so like those types of, that's a way to kind of get around, like if we can't get a ban or we can't get something like that, we can also look at it from the lens of like, who are the businesses that are willing to do this, and how can we help them and set them up to do it?
Support them.
Yeah, and then maybe it'll get more attention, and you know,
and understand what their challenges are.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know, like I think that really helps to know. It's like, yeah, we'd like to do this, and here's what we're up against. And speaking of Trex, the PPRC in Bozeman, there is, and I think at the national level, Megan Wolf, whose parents live in Bozeman. She's the Beyond Plastics policy director, and she's going to be here this summer. So I'm going over there to meet with her. But she did some research, and Trex is also using plastic bags. So that's because there's really, plastic bags are nasty. They're really hard.
Right.
Yes, yeah.
There's not a lot of good options. Any options.
A lot of businesses now I see are asking, you know, do you want a bag? And I mean, that's even progress.
That is
It
progress.
wasn't that many years ago that they automatically grab that plastic bag and put your stuff into it. So I appreciate
That's
that.
great.
And I try to tell them,
I
I
do
know
too.
it's just a clerk, not somebody making the decision, but
I
I just
think
say, I appreciate
I
that.
think that does matter.
That you're not
Those
offering.
interactions with individuals in businesses, I
too.
do think that matters.
I think
Because
so.
we're all
Yeah,
humans here after all.
yeah.
I know. Like with Costco, you know, their big thing is selling multiples of everything. And so that's,
Yeah.
I think the reason they use this plastic to wrap everything together. So they would have to find
A
a
different way.
substitute and something that
Hemp
was
cord.
And
was affordable.
it comes back to what Sarah said in terms of design, you know,
Yeah.
that we really have to just say, you know, we can do better. And there are lots of brilliant people that, you know, it's not like we've never had products without plastic before, you know.
Yeah, now, and I notice you're careful to always say single-use plastics. I don't know that we could, as a civilization, function without plastics. Because of,
And
look, we're sitting on it,
Yeah.
and the cars are made of
Yeah.
plastic, and I mean, there's so many zillions of stuff, everything.
It's embedded.
So,
and
but how do we deal with that? I mean,
so,
we've gotta get a
and I
mindset.
do that deliberately. I mean, it is all plastics.
Yes,
But I think we have to take on kind of the lower hanging fruit in
Yeah.
terms of
Yes.
this really is unnecessary.
yes.
And as we learn how to do that and design for reuse, refill, recycle is
Yeah.
embedded in the culture, then, we'll get better at that.
Yeah.
And for the things that don't have a place to go, there is no good answer. Come up with a better answer. It's like, okay, medical waste, we don't have to, we can't take that on right now. It's like saving people's lives and,
Right.
and we can design it in a way and throughout the chain of it that at the end of use, it goes here, and that's a less harmful option than burning it or whatever. I think there are some things that, yes, we can't, and we can't do it all at once either. This is huge. And so starting with things that there are alternatives like styrene, it's like starting with those things that, okay, make a case for why this is a good idea. If you don't want to ban this, tell me why it's such a good idea. Because some things there's really not a lot of good to say about it. Oh, well, it has, people earn money. So, Gaia's done a good job at looking at how actually doing a better job with waste will increase jobs and potentially good jobs. So it's just reframing and refocusing on how and what we do that way. Yeah.
Tell me again what PPR stands for.
Plastic Pollution Reduction Coalition. And they're a community group, but they're based out of Hope Lutheran Church in Bozeman.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And so several of them took the class, kind of the Becoming a Local or Beyond Plastics affiliate group. There's classes that are free if you sign up with the intention of forming. So for me, I have responsibilities, like all of us have different responsibilities, that I'm not in the position to start a new group. So my focus that I've chosen is to focus on the legislative session.
Okay.
So, but I'm very interested in working if there's enough interest here in, supporting. And so part of it, they recommend 3 different roles: someone who's kind of education outreach, someone who's more like what you do in terms of communications and, getting the word out, and then someone who's more focused on big picture action. In my case, if I was part of that group, I would default to this legislative place, because I think that's where the biggest bang for our buck in terms of larger systems change. Not that I don't believe that individual actions and contacting Costco and all of those things are important. I think they all play a role, but that's where I'm choosing to put my energy, because I only have so much.
Exactly. So much. So much energy.
But I think all of those other actions all feed into greater awareness. So I'm interested to know, it's like, and I don't know if Families First wants to explore if there was an option for some groups like Sierra Clubs in different parts of the state are hosting a Beyond Plastics affiliate group within their group. So that it's, so finding a compatible group is also an option.
Yes.
And the resources, it's been so great to connect with people from all over the country. The monthly meetings and the information and material that's shared is really great. You start to feel not so alone and know that there are good people out there working on this stuff. So thank you, Mary.
Go, but
Yeah.
thank you. I'm Nancy, another Nancy.
I've been doing that all day today. I've been calling people by
That's
the wrong
okay.
name.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Nancy,
you.
what's your last name?
McCullough.
McCullough.
She's on this little
Oh,
thing
she's on the
You
list.
got my
So,
contact.
Okay, and you live in Missoula?
I do.
Okay, excellent.
All
Thanks
right.
for coming.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Nancy.
Bye,
I'm gonna
Nancy.
turn
Julian.
this Zoom call now too.
What's your name?
Thank you so much for
Julian.
coming.
Julian.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm gonna send up a follow-up email.
I
Um,
just
So
got
if you
hired
RSVP'd
to be a
online, you'll get
communications
that
intern
email.
for Families for so much fun.
Good.
Great, so that is for the summer?